This video is the first in a series where I will share some of the key evidence about working with nature as an occupational therapist. My name is Bronwyn Painter and I'm the Nature OT. One of the most common questions that occupational therapists ask me is about the evidence or research that supports working with nature in our occupational therapy work. So in this video, I'm going to start with the basics and share some of the evidence about the outcomes of how nature supports improved health outcomes and improvements in 6 areas of function that are of interest to us in our holistic OT practice. So firstly, in relation to health outcomes, a lot of this evidence comes from correlational studies, so from population-based studies looking at the greenness of the areas in which we live. And so they use techniques such as satellite imaging to look at green space in residential areas, and then use methodologies to control for what can be controlled in terms of other variables, and look at the impact of the greenness of the space, the nature in our everyday lives where people live. So it's fascinating to read the research methodologies if you're into that sort of thing. I'm going to read my notes for this to make sure I don't miss something. So more contact with nature, so living in greener areas, is associated with less cardiovascular disease, less chronic obstructive airway disease and other respiratory diseases, diabetes, obesity, cancer, specifically lung, breast and colon cancer. It's associated with less allergies, fewer headaches, and with better mental health and self-reported well-being. Now, these are big claims and they're based on population level data. So as OTs, I don't think we're going to be suggesting for an individual client that spending time with us in a nature-based OT intervention is going to prevent cancer. And as someone who has experienced cancer, I'm pretty cautious about those kind of big picture claims and translating that population level evidence to an individual. But I still think it's really worth us understanding that spending time in nature is associated with significant health improvement. Let's look, I will just reduce myself down. Let's look at more specifically 6 key areas of function and what the evidence about nature tells us. And I encourage you to think about, as you listen to this information, think about your clients and your area of OT practice and what is relevant to your clients in terms of functional benefits that they might achieve from a nature-based intervention. Some of this is going to seem really obvious. I see the purpose of understanding the evidence as OTs being able to explain this to our clients, to our workplaces, and to our funding sources, people who approve funding for nature-based OT services. So let's start with physical function. So being outside and accessing quality nature and recreational facilities is associated with higher levels of physical activity and lower levels of obesity, as well as higher levels of mental health. Being outside is inherently motivating for us to want to move. And if you go looking for the evidence, you'll find examples like preschool children who engage in free play outside have better gross motor development than children who don't play outside. Looking at a physiological level, so, quite reductionistic for OTs, but really important to understand. Many of these benefits or outcomes of contact with nature are interrelated. So, for example, spending time in nature is associated with reduced blood pressure, reduced heart rate, and improved heart rate variability. Reduction in inflammatory cytokines or stress hormones, including salivary cortisol, which is quite a common measure used in nature connection or nature contact research. It's associated with reduced blood glucose levels and reduced pain. Time in nature is also associated with improved cardiovascular relaxation and recovery of homeostasis in coronary artery disease. So it's associated with improved immune system function, including specifically killer T cell activation. So there's some really interesting laboratory and studies with actual humans measuring immune system function, including over like a 30-day period. So it's really interesting to look at, at the effect that nature has on our bodies at a cellular level. Time in nature is associated with improved stress recovery. It's associated with faster healing and improved sleep. And who doesn't need better sleep? So, overall, at a physiological level, time in nature is associated with decreasing our sympathetic nervous system activation and increasing the activation of our parasympathetic nervous system. So, moving us from stress, fight, flight, to rest and digest, and just really calming down that stress response, which then has, so many flow through benefits in terms of pain, sleep, many areas of function. Psychological function. So, time in nature is associated with reduction in anger and frustration, less anxiety and depression symptoms. It's associated with reducing the distress associated with pain, reducing rumination, which is those like negative self thoughts, and reducing negative affect or emotion. It's also associated with increases in improved mood, self-esteem, feelings of relaxation and calmness, improved life satisfaction, and self-reported health and well-being. So where well-being is considered, it's considered in two ways, around feeling good and functioning well, which is a very OT perspective. Time in nature is also associated with an increased sense of vitality, of a sense of being alive. It's associated with improved behaviour for school students and improved impulse inhibition. From a cognitive perspective, time in nature is associated with reduced cognitive fatigue and restoration of cognitive attention, including concentration. So this is that classic, you're really doing some work during the day, perhaps in an office-based role that requires a high level of cognitive attention, memory, information processing, problem solving, and you go out for a walk in your lunch break or you go to the park, and it resets your ability to, to use those higher cognitive functions. So time in nature is associated with improved memory, improved executive functioning, so the problem solving, reasoning, concentration, decision making. And these translate to outcomes that have been measured with improved academic performance, improved ability to perform tasks, and improved productivity in the workplace. Spiritual function. So time in nature has been associated with increased spiritual well-being, which is described as a sense of being connected with something greater than ourselves. It's also associated with increased inspiration. And the final area of function that I've looked at is social function. So time in nature facilitates social interaction. It enables social empowerment. Increased green space in a suburb is associated with reduced crime rates and reduced violence as well. Increased green space is associated with increased social cohesion, a sense of social support, and improved social well-being. So a sense of being connected with people as well as being connected with nature. So people connect well in nature. And so with all these health and specific functional outcomes, contact with nature is considered a significant health determinant, and the use of nature is encouraged as a resource for health promotion. So wow, that's a lot. And I've kind of just rattled all that off quickly. But in summary, time in nature results in better health outcomes, and nature is the optimal environment for function. It enables us as OTs to work in a holistic way, knowing that time in nature supports improved function across all of those 6 areas. So The next video will be about how nature produces these outcomes, the theories and explanations, so that you can clearly articulate and explain why nature is important in your OT work with your clients. If you want to see the next video, send me a message from the link below. You can also request a copy of my reference list that supports the information that I've provided by sending me a message also. If you know of someone else who might benefit or be interested in this video, please share it. And if you're an OT and you have specific questions about evidence for your client group or your kind of OT practice, you can book in a free chat with me today by following the booking link under the video. But do get in quickly because I only allocate a few spaces for that in my schedule each week. But I love talking to OTs and I love the evidence about nature. So take care, take nature. See you next time.